All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second interactive webinar. Today's topic is going to be hydroponics for a greener Canada, growing a sustainable future. Topics that are really trending in today's economic environment here in Canada and North America and probably globally. Today, we're going to have Mackenzie Warford, president of the CHA, the Canadian Hydroponic Association. He also is the owner-operator of Papa's Farm. And Sydney Rice, vice president of the CHA, and she's an education lead at SucSeed. Today, before we begin, I am going to let you know how to interact in today's interactive webinar. So a couple housekeeping items before we dive in. We're going to have some resources, that paperclip button widget down here. You can click on that, get some extra resources from ourselves and probably the Canadian Hydroponic Association. It's going to be on there as well too. The questions, so the Q&A. If you see something that you want to discuss that's on the website, don't be afraid. Send them in right away. If it can wait to the end, we'll answer them at the end. If it's relevant to the existing slide right away, we'll get them answered right away. Speaker bios, a little bit more information about myself, Sydney, and Mackenzie. Polls and surveys, you're going to see a poll right off the bat. In regards to what you think. Well, you'll see that in a couple seconds. We're going to see probably at least one poll anyways. We like keeping people, you don't want to keep listening to us, right? So we want you to be interactive here. Engaging, don't be afraid to send some hearts, smiling faces, thumbs up if you like it or approve it. Register for more information. You can quickly register for our next webinar. And there's also going to be a place to see any past webinars. And even in these past webinars, you can keep sending us in questions or information, and we'll get the answers to you as soon as we can. And obviously a calendar there so you can book a meeting with ourselves or the CHA to learn more about how to become a member. All right. Well, just quickly about us, because we want to get to the CHA right away, but we're Aelius LED. We're sponsoring and putting on these webinars because we truly believe in education. Knowledge is power. And what we've been doing here in the last 6 or 7 years, we're focusing on growing indoors. And that's another trending topic as well, too, especially with all the economic uncertainties, and also global warming seems to be have an effect on some of the crops across the world. So if you're looking to light something up, light a plant up indoors, we are your go-to place. Speaking with Grow with a Purpose, that's an initiative we started probably about a year and a half ago, which brought us to some of these webinars. We want to grow with a purpose, right? Whether it's donating fixtures to colleges, universities, or empowering future cultivators. We want you to be able to grow for yourself, regardless what the plant is. We truly believe in empowering local food supply, and the way to do that is through organizations such as CHA, because not everybody knows right away. Not everybody has a green thumb. So you're looking to learn from experts and learn from associations such as this. So before we dive into our presentation, we're going to get the poll right off the bat here and ask you what you think. Where is it? What do you think is the biggest challenge to food security in Canada? Select all that apply. A being climate change, like we explained, and some extreme weather, supply chain disruptions, and transportation costs. Actually, CHA, I noticed on LinkedIn, you put a great post there today in regards to how our lettuce gets to where you guys are located over in Newfoundland. I thought that was fantastic. Not everybody knows how far food travels nowadays. See today's political challenges, that too, limited access to fresh produce in remote areas, very true, and lack of awareness and investment in sustainable farming, which is also true as well too, because a lot of these big farms that have tried to go indoors right off the bat, a lot of them are out of business now, probably because they went too big. So I'll let, is that Mackenzie online?
Yeah, Mackenzie.
Attaboy. Mackenzie's here.
Leave it to the farmer to get in at the last second to figure the technology side of things out.
Well, because you're out in the farm. You're out in the farm, right?
Yeah, I'm here at the operations center where farming happens.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so yeah, just looking at the quick poll results here before we get you guys on the go here. Yes, there's a little bit of everything, right? Climate change, extreme weather, as I mentioned earlier, is having a big effect. Supply chains disruption. I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of those coming in the next 4 years, anyways, along with the political challenges. Tariff wars, trade wars, limited access to fresh produce in remote areas. That's true too. So smaller farms are going to win out there, or growing for yourself. Lack of awareness and investment. There's a lack of investment in a lot of things nowadays. You would think that the government and some of these lending institutions would start targeting some of these farms and indoor farm initiatives. Okay, so thank you very much for answering those polls, everybody. So now let's get right to it. Without further ado, I'm going to hand this off both to Mackenzie and Sydney, and pay attention. This is really interesting. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. I'll give an introduction first, I suppose. My name is Sydney Rice. I'm the Vice President of the Canadian Hydroponic Association. I'm based in St. John's, Newfoundland, and I am the education lead for SucSeed. SucSeed is a hydroponic educational company, and we just received our charitable status January of last year. So we do have a charity as well under our branch. And that's our bread and butter is doing hydroponic education in the classroom. So we really enjoy it, and we're starting to do a lot more community work as well now. And I've been in the farming industry for about 15 years.
Excellent. Excellent. And that is none other than the best vice president we could ask for at the Canadian Hydroponics Association. That's Sydney Rice. So we're honored to have Sydney on the team at the Canadian Hydroponics Association. And I am the president and one of the founders. We were founded in 2021 was the first day that we decided to officially incorporate our nonprofit organization and association. And so it's a real opportunity to have recognized the importance for people to come together as a team and as a community to discuss things that are limiting us from getting ahead in especially rural parts of Canada and even in urban parts of Canada where there's lacking fresh produce. There was a real need for the Canadian Hydroponics Association to be able to network the information from coast to coast, Canadian growers facing Canadian conditions, and talking about the issues and troubleshooting together. So, like I said, my name is Mackenzie Warford, and I'm happy to be here today. So, without further ado, I'll let Sydney take control of the presentation here, and that way you don't have to hear too much from me.
So like Mackenzie said, we pretty much established ourselves to be a hub for farmers, to share experiences, troubleshooting. That is our main goal, just to help out farmers. Some mistakes that a farmer in Alberta could have made, we already made here in Newfoundland. So it's just always nice to be able to share information. And it just gives you kind of, like a sounding board to bounce your ideas off of as well. And just with so much knowledge in the group, it's really great to be able to avail of that for sure. So a few things we're going to be chatting about today. Canadian food statistics. We're going to start out with that because I know it is a big concern for everybody. With the tariffs and everything coming in now, I know that everybody is really trying to support Canadian, is looking at all their labels. I know when I went to the grocery store yesterday, every single person, myself included, was just meticulously reading these labels. Like they had like the secret nuclear codes on them or something, trying to decipher if they're Canadian products or not. We're going to chat about hydroponics, what they are, the types of hydroponics that exist in the world. There are some newer ones as well that are coming out of the Netherlands that are really cool. And then how will the hydroponics help Canadians and how we can grow better in our own country.
Own back door, own house, own province. Local is always better, I think. And when you have a lot of your eggs in the same basket and something happens, you start to recognize the importance for more local, sustainable agriculture and the abilities that hydroponics provides in areas with short grow seasons. The zone is not right for growing, with limited access to sunlight and stuff like that. We're above the equator, let's face it. So it's time to get on the bandwagon with a technology that helps encourage agriculture without the harmful impact on the environment, not only through the farming, but through the logistical burden that it's creating.
100%. On average, right now, we have a question here. Do you think tariffs will positively or negatively affect indoor farming in Canada? I do think it will have a positive effect, to be honest. I do think that people are going to be more open to the idea of hydroponics and learning more about it and figuring out what is it? Like, how can we grow hydroponically? Can I do it myself? And I think right now, a lot of people, especially Newfoundland, about years and years ago, we had a project here called Sprung Greenhouses. It was an absolute failure. They only grew cucumbers, and they grew about 4 cucumbers per family per week, when the average family was only eating a quarter of a cucumber per week. So that used a lot of old technology, the old halogen lights that are really hot and dangerous to work with. I mean, it was just kind of this spaceship looking thing that was plopped right in the middle of the city of Mount Pearl. And often when we go out and speak to people, we always get back, oh, you're the next Sprung Greenhouses. But I find even here in Newfoundland, where maybe we might be a bit behind on some of the technology and stuff, people are starting to catch up because they realize that just because something was a failure doesn't mean everything's going to be. Technology changes. Like farmers are now not just a farmer. You have to be a coder and a tech person and know how to do all these things at the same time. So farming really is changing rapidly.
Now, the biggest thing, Sydney, too, is the biggest failure there was the fact that they gave up. I think when you give up, that's when you admit defeat, and that's when you fail. I mean, the other thing was they put it in a location that didn't really make sense because it was the foggiest part of Newfoundland. If it would have been in a more central region, like where I'm to, we experience more sunlight per day in comparison to St. John's and Mount Pearl. And that's not something that Newfoundlanders, that's something we joke about, right? That's not something we don't know about. It's more of a common sense thing. So when we failed is when we gave up. But yeah, I definitely agree with what Sydney said too, is the tariffs have brought awareness to the situation that has always been there. It's never been worse or better. It's always been the same, but it's the awareness now that this is created. And like I said, we have a lot of eggs in the same basket, and we need to make sure that the things that happen here in Newfoundland are also happening in places like British Columbia, where they face the same weather patterns because they're in the same demographic, us, and the same zone. So when we work with people across Canada to come up with solutions, we can do it that much faster. And it can be that much better and less of an investment for the investor at the end of the day, because 2 and 3 people working together will know something better than one person struggling to figure it out themselves. And that's why the importance of groups like ours in the organization to network is very, very vital. Very vital.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your question.
Definitely. That was an amazing question. And yeah, I think for better or worse, the information is getting out there, which is always a good thing for people to be more informed. So popping back to our food statistics, right now for 2025, this forecast was actually done before the tariffs came into place. So this average family of 4 increase is actually going to be much higher if those tariffs are playing a role. But right now, the average family of 4 is expected to have an increase of $801.56 from last year on grocery prices alone. That's not even including, everybody's struggling with everything else. Everything is rising, but food in itself is 3 to 5%. That is a really high rate. Unfortunately, those percentages are not going back to the farmer. They're mostly lost in the transportation area somewhere. So really, the farmer and the person who is buying the produce, they're both getting the short end of the stick in this instance, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that at the end of the day, as the farmers, we need to make sure that we stand up for our prices and what we deserve for our stuff. So we're not looking to blame people as such, but if you as a farmer feel you need a network to talk to about things like that, you're not getting fair compensation, that's one more important aspect of an organization, where you come together and you body a group of individuals and you come up with a strong voice and it's something worth fighting for. That's what we're all about. So if you have an issue like that, you let us know.
Absolutely. And it's great to be able to compare to, like, with other farmers, like, what are you selling your basil for? This is what I'm selling it for. Just back and forth like that is just great for keeping things fair, like amongst all provinces, but then also considering that maybe Newfoundland does need a bit more technology. Maybe we do need more Aelius LED lights because we don't have as much light here in Newfoundland. But yeah, just those chats are super, super important for us as farmers, for sure.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, a lot of Canadians are also food insecure as of right now, and that is only going to get worse. As of 2023, 22.9 people in 10 provinces lived in a food insecure household. And I'm sure all of you have heard of it and seen it. The food banks around are just absolutely limbed. There's nothing left in them. Local food pantries that people live in communities, they're absolutely just, people just can't afford what they used to be able to afford. And yeah, especially with the tariffs going on now and the transportation systems kind of being halted and trying to figure out a transportation system from Mexico up to here for those things. It's just becoming a big ball of stress for a lot of people.
And we see it in all aspects of life, whether you live in an urban area, whether you live in a big city of Toronto, whether you live in the small community of Kings Point or Newfoundland, you know, whether you're in Vancouver or you're up in the Northwest Territories, you're up in Northern Labrador and Makuvik and Rigolette and Wabush and Sheshatshiu, you're in the Aboriginal or First Nations Reserve, wherever you are across Canada, the food insecurity has gotten worse, and we see it. And that's why we need to elevate the importance of hydroponics and our message to people that we can provide nutrient-dense produce 365 days a year at a reasonably fair cost if we work together. So as we see these scary numbers and stuff like that, we need to remain vigilant and know that there is an answer and a solution to this, right? And it's cooperation
Absolutely.
and collaboration.
So I'm not sure how many of you know this, but 60% of agri-food exports from Canada actually go to the USA. So that is a very different statistic than what Mr. Trump has decided to put forth. But they actually are very dependent on Canada for grains, oilseeds, red meat, dairy. All those things are exported right down to the USA, but we also do export to 200 other countries. We do have a very healthy grain, oilseed, red meat, dairy exporting program, I guess, through Canada. This food can also now be, relocated. We can start rethinking about where our food is actually going. Do we want to start keeping it more so in Canada? All these things are options now where we're kind of at a standstill, where farmers are kind of trying to figure out where it's going. I don't think any of our food will be wasted per se, because like I said, we do have other countries we can export to if we do have an excess. But I think kind of focusing back on our own country at this point and just kind of seeing how much we do export, maybe it's a good time for us to really just buckle down and kind of start saying, what can we keep here in Canada?
Yeah, Canadians should be eating Canadian grown produce is something that I've started saying, and is something that I firmly believe. And it's not a bash at the support that we've gotten in the past. Without, the system, where would we be? But the awareness now that we do need to be more resilient, and this is where it has gotten us at this point in time. It makes total sense to start relying on hydroponics and aeroponics and sustainable growing, regenerative agriculture, and taking some of that exportation, bringing it back home to Canadians and feeding our people again. And then, like you said, open up the idea of new trade agreements and more interprovincial trades. That's, I think, the biggest thing that we need to see is if PEI has the potatoes, well, Newfoundland has some of the best water in the world, so our hydroponics and aeroponics systems will be some of the best in Canada. Let us give you lettuce.
Water.
This exportation of all the food as well, like there's statistics that there's so much of this food is lost during transportation, whereas hydroponics, when you pick them, they're technically still alive. They have the root system on them, and that kind of leads to another question of like, why aren't we growing on these trucks to like bring them places? Why aren't the plants alive when they're being transported instead of, you know, cut from their nutrient source and losing nutrients every day? Mackenzie's standing right in a greenhouse. Everything is alive in there. And when he sells it to his farm, to the people that are bringing it home, it is alive. It still has the root system on it. It can still uptake all those nutrients. Those gorgeous roots have so much that are still in them. And that's why hydroponics stay fresher for longer, just simply because
all those roots can go back to the animals. All the roots can be fed back to the animals, as well as, you know, it's a full cycle where we can reuse every aspect of hydroponics. The water gets recycled, the fertilizer gets recycled within the system. The plant can be eaten, and the roots can be given to the chickens or the pigs. It's a win-win-win situation, and we're not putting any harmful impact on the environment.
There's another question there.
Lily. So if we didn't export 60% of our agri-food to the US, will we have the facilities? So that is one thing that we're lacking here in Canada, is the secondary processing facilities. Like your example there, the oil seeds into oil. There are some smaller companies that do have processing facilities here in Canada, but unfortunately, a lot of it is brought down to the US, very similar to the car manufacturing. Like, we have a lot of raw materials, then they go back down to the US to get so much processing done. They come up here, get the rest done, then we send it back to the US. Like, you know, it's always going back and forth. But yes, I think that is definitely something we need to look into investing in the future for Canadians. More secondary processing facilities. There is a facility in Ontario. They are pumping out truckloads of tomatoes every day. And
per million.
Per million. There we go. I was trying to remember their name. And like, there's no reason that those tomatoes have to go somewhere else. Like, they can stay right in Ontario. They can be, say, made into Heinz ketchup or something. There's no reason why they should have to cross the border, have some spoilage, when we can have 100% of the produce, bring it right next door to where they're growing it, and just have a facility and all at the same time produce more jobs for Canadians, because we want to have a healthy ecosystem here in Canada. We want to make sure that we can do everything we can with our produce.
And that's you go right ahead. That's the funny thing about Sprung too, Sydney, is that nobody in Newfoundland like cucumbers, but how many of us like mustard pickles?
Exactly.
Everybody likes mustard pickles. Why couldn't we put a mustard pickle factory next to the Sprung greenhouse, take the cucumbers and make mustard pickles? You know, there's so many times when we can reanalyze and restructure something that we're doing to make it benefit all of Canada and Canadians and our agriculture through the use of hydroponics, sustainable growing and controlled environments, right? So there's a lot of opportunity to reuse what we're doing to benefit Canadians instead of the alternatives.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And one of the things we are probably the most I guess rich in here in Canada, two things is land and water. So, I mean, right now our farms only cover 6.2% of Canada's land mass, which is not a ton. And there are under 200,000 farms across Canada. So a lot of the smaller farms have unfortunately phased out over the last 40 years, but we are noticing certainly as the pandemic hit, a lot more people kind of went back to their roots, where people hadn't grown probably in 4 generations. We now have people who are, you know, coming in and asking so many questions about, like, how can I get this growing? How can I start this? How much land do I need? And you really are seeing the more like small mom and pop farms starting to pop up again, like Papa's Farm. You're not seeing like these big, huge conglomerates anymore as much. You're seeing more so like the local, like, you know, who owns the farm, you know, that say like, you know, Mackenzie and Jen, they work at Papa's Farm, you know, the owners. It seems to be switching more so back to that.
Yeah, I think we're almost going back to where our forefathers were, where you're growing food for your local community. I think there's a big
And what's
uptick.
cool about it is Sydney is teaching the youth. So like when I need a farmhand coming up, they're already going to know hydroponics because SucSeed's technology is in all of the schools in Newfoundland, and they're pressing into the mainland. But I also heard they're pressing into Australia too, which is crazy to hear, right? But it's because of those connections and those cooperations. Like we're the farmers, and Sydney is teaching the youth, and it is all going to make for a better future for Canadians and people in areas where we import 90% of what we consume. Like, can you imagine how much fresh produce we lack? It's crazy to think about. And a lot of Canada faces the same thing.
So a little bit about hydroponics. I'm not sure how much background information you guys have, but we'll give you a little bit of a overview. So hydroponics are great because they are fresh, they grow fast, they actually grow 40% faster than soil grown things. And that's because everything is babied in your system. It's given the water exactly when it needs to, it's given the nutrients exactly when it needs to. It's given the light exactly when it needs to. It doesn't need to grow its roots to search for anything. So they grow faster. You can pick them easier because you're not kind of, shaking the soil off or having to take the roots. You take the roots and all, it all goes into the container. That gets taken home, and then people can compost or whatever they want with the root systems. But you can grow a lot more as well with hydroponics. I mean, you can see in this photo and behind Mackenzie there, the space that you need for hydroponics is so much less than what you need for outdoor traditional farming. There is still definitely a place for outdoor traditional farming, but I find that things like lettuce or Swiss chard or kale or things that are really susceptible to the elements, number one, and also to pests, they're just straight up better done in hydroponics. You're saving space, you're saving time, and you're giving a better produce altogether. Your product is cleaner, your product is healthier, your product is more tender, to be honest, because it doesn't have to go around being beaten around by the wind, being beaten around by the elements outside. The hydroponics are just much more forgiving to the plant, let's say that.
Yeah, and I like the fact I had somebody ask the other day how it was actually less. It uses less water when it is completely a water-based system, and I explained the fact that when farmers who do traditional crops and stuff go into massive drought, if they don't have advanced irrigation systems, which also still use lots of water, they need to use equipment to go out and water those fields, and that usually dries up relatively quick if they're an industrial scale where they've been using herbicides and pesticides which have destroyed the top of the soil, and there's no roots or vegetation to hold the water. Water retention comes from the grass and the soil and the actual roots, so there's no water retention, so they're pumping water out on the fields in places where they have shortages of water, but they're trying to increase the amount of agriculture production they have to be sustainable. But it's not the answer. It's the fact that our water, when we're going through a drought outside of the greenhouse, is still contained within the system. We lose a little bit to evaporation, but not nearly as much because we cool the water to keep it from reaching boiling points. Obviously, we don't want to scorch the plants. So it just makes that much more sense when you look at the impact it has on the environment. There's no fertilizer hitting the ground either, right?
Yeah, how often do you actually, is there a time, Mackenzie, that you actually get rid of the water? Like, do you recycle it every year, every 2 years, or you can just do this in perpetuity?
For my greenhouse, it's in and out. It depends. Like the summer may need to be cleaned more often than the winter due to the higher temperatures. But I am finding that it works at least 2, 3, 4 times a year. Just bear with me one second. I got a visitor as well.
And the tanks are usually pretty manageable as well to be mixing and to be monitoring things like that. You want to make sure that you have a good oxygen supply in your water because you don't want your plants to drown. So usually a bubbler is added. Then you usually have like your nutrient solution. Sometimes a bit of peroxide is added just in case if anybody had any like problems with their roots or anything like that, we'd suggest adding a bit of that. But there's always little tips and tricks you can add to your water to make it a little bit better for certain plants. And that's something we chat about as well in the Hydroponic Association meetings. It's always, what's the best one to grow? Like, oh, what's your nutrient composition? Like, what are you using? Oh, what else are you adding to your water? And those things are great tips and tricks that sometimes you heard it from your grandfather, great grandfather, but those old wives' tales, I'm telling you, sometimes there's a lot to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sorry for that earlier. It's usually about 4 to 6 times during the year, depending on the amount of the amount of plants and stuff. But I also like to mention, we're always learning new things too. I mean, at the start when we were talking to members who had just started their first hydroponics system, and it was more of a DUI system. They were putting in hydrogen peroxide at rates that would actually kill the plants and stuff. So we explained to them, like there's a certain amount of due diligence you have to do when you're working with hydroponic plants, because you are going to eat them at the end of the day, right? So we like to make sure that people are still aware of the safety precautions that they have to take when doing stuff like this. A lot of our executive are active in OH&S and safety, and I also have my HACCP regulations. So it's very nice to get that bit of experience that has a little bit of actual backing to it too. We're not suggesting anybody go out and pour hydrogen peroxide in their system right now without talking to somebody about it.
Absolutely.
Well, apparently you can use it for
the
COVID
biome
too.
is still good, right? In the system.
And Mackenzie, some people use it for COVID back in the day.
Well,
I heard that too.
I like hydrogen peroxide over bleach and chlor, any harsh cleaner, because it's not something you have to let oxidize or bleed off for 24 hours before you use it again. It's much nicer on the environment of plants. It's what they use in the hospitals and the dentists for a reason, right?
Right. Are there any plants that people might not, when you think hydroponics, you think leafy greens? Is there something else, or possibly strawberries, peppers? Is there something else that you would like to see grown more here in Canada? Obviously, citrus would be tough, but
It will
Well,
be.
that's cool. I'll let Sydney go first.
Yeah, strawberries do phenomenally in hydroponics. People don't realize like how much they actually produce. We actually do have some hydroponic houses doing strawberries at Lester's. And we've seen like a huge uptake. And then we can meet our seasons as well, which is another really great thing. So we'll usually use an ever-bearing plant, just because you can get 2 harvests out of it then. So then we'll do the earlier harvest, and then usually in the fall they'll do another sprouting. But I think that we could absolutely do strawberries. There's no need for us to be getting strawberries from like down in Mexico when they're picked when they're white and then they ripen on the truck. It's be so much more beneficial for us to have actual red berries that are actually ripe and have 100% of the produce or the nutrients that we're expecting from that produce. But yeah, I think like berries, I think are super easy. I also think that you could do things like brassicas. So like your cabbages and your broccolis and your cauliflowers, those are all things that are definitely done in hydroponics as well, and they thrive.
I've seen plenty of different operations doing a multitude of hydroponic farming, and I don't think there's actually a limit on what you can do with hydroponics. I think you can grow any plant that's grown in the soil in the specialized hydroponic system, where I believe we have it up ahead in the presentation. Different systems like DWC, NFT, the vertical wall, horizontal stacked. All these systems provide the ability to do any kind of plant. I mean, I've seen people who use a hydroponic system for growing trees. I've seen people use hydroponic systems for growing everything. Like leafy greens are actually to the point where it's laughable that we're still looking at it. It should be done, perfected, and we should be able to supply 100% of Canada's leafy greens through our own efforts. And I know there's a farm in Ontario, I believe it's called Moochie Farms, that will be doing a large amount of lettuce operation here in Canada, just like Vermilion's doing a lot of tomato operations, which is what we need to see. And these are hydroponic operations. So the ability, we haven't seen the limitation of the ability. And as you know, like the cannabis industry has been led by the hydroponics and the aeroponics industry. And with some of the investment that went into that industry, if that was put towards the agriculture industry, we could see a real uptick of the overall health of Canadians and the availability of high quality of produce, plus the reduction of the cost, because we won't be affected by the global trends and stuff like that. So if you want to grow citrus plants, it's a matter of pairing the facility up with a building that produces enough heat that you're not going to have to spend a lot of money to produce the heat. All you have to worry about is the money to produce the lighting. With solar power, you can produce your own energy to produce the light, to produce that citrus fruit, just as cheaply as you can for the amount of money we're spending to import that citrus fruit from a different part of the world, which may cost $4,000 or $5,000 to get citrus here in Newfoundland. The ferry alone consumes, I believe I have it up here somewhere recently. I was looking at the statistics, and she consumes somewhere between 4,500 and 7,200 liters worth of fuel per trip. So you can imagine how much money that is to bring some citrus fruit to the island of Newfoundland. And the same with, let's say, British Vancouver Island, for instance. Hydroponics can be done, and it can be cheaper.
Definitely. I
Paired
see that.
with the right companion.
Question from Colin here. If somebody's looking to grow food at home with a hydroponic system, do they need a different system for each type of crop, or could somebody grow leafy greens and fruiting crops all together in one simple system? So with SucSeed, we actually do, we give the kiddos 6 different types of seeds. So it's basically a tote, 64-liter tote. It has a lid on it, and you can grow 12 plants at a time. Comes with a bubbler on the inside, a timer for your light, and the light sits over top. And we actually have people who are growing tomatoes and lettuce and basil all at the same time. They want to do like a kind of like salad-ish thing. So that's typically what a lot of kids do pick. So what we always tell them is leave room for your tomatoes because they're going to need to grow. So where there's 12 holes, we say the 4 in the corners are tomatoes, and then the rest can be a mix of whatever you like. By the time you're harvesting your lettuce, then your tomatoes are grown up to the next stage. They're going to need their next type of nutrients for flowering. And then you can continue on with your tomatoes that way. So you definitely can combine things in systems. People have jimmy rigged their own systems up. You don't necessarily need to purchase like one of these systems that's, you know, a plug and play system. I've seen people just go with a bit of PVC pipe and a like a bubbler from a fish tank, and they've made it work. So it can really be that easy as like a bucket or just something to put water in.
Now, if you are looking for the Cadillac, though, I would advise you to reach out to Hope Innovations out in Alberta, who is actually a member of the Canadian Hydroponics Association, and they have a beautiful turnkey system that is revolutionary, looks great, and does exactly what Sydney's saying, but that's if you want something that's a little more attractable set up in your kitchen or your dining room space that you want to show to your friends and stuff. If you're like me and you're a little more rustic and old-fashioned, you're definitely going to want a little bit of a DIY, which that's where we have experience in both fields with the Canadian Hydroponics Association. We have members who've done commercial growing, reverse. We have members who build and create residential systems. So you can definitely put 2 different plants in the same system, but the question is what it is you're trying to accomplish and whether or not you're trying to generate some revenue. So as business owners in hydroponics, we also identify and understand the importance of narrowing down your scope and what you're growing so that it doesn't overwhelm you. If you're trying to create a demand or a supply for a demand, make sure you understand your demand and that your product is tuned to the specific hydroponic ratios that would ensure healthy, successful plant growth, right? If you're growing romaine, I wouldn't add tomatoes in my system just because that would interrupt the balance that I have created for the romaine. But in the future, I will incorporate a new vertical wall in the greenhouse where I'll be growing strawberries, and they'll be completely independent from the hydroponic system I'm growing romaine, because that may come with a 2-stage fertilizer where during vegetative mode, I'll want them to be focusing on their leaf production, and during the flowering stage, I'll want them to be focusing on the flower production before they go into making berries and stuff. So yes, at home it's a lot funner to be able to do that plug and play, try a whole bunch of stuff, and get a general purpose hydroponic fertilizer with a general purpose light. It's very good. I know Aelius LED has some of those lights that would be able to help you with that.
Thanks for the plug, Mackenzie. Mackenzie and Sydney, yourself, for a newbie coming on to a webinar like this, or just getting into this and wanting to grow at home, to us, it sounds like there's a lot of work. And I know you've said, no, it's not. Once you get to know how to do it and you know the knowledge, it's not that much work. How often are you actually looking at your plants? Maybe not so much in a commercial setting, but at home, how often would that homeowner have to be monitoring these plants? Is it daily, weekly?
So not honestly a lot less than you think. So I've loved to say this the last couple of weeks with the presentations I've done in classrooms, but we actually had a flood in our office before Christmas. It happened in September, and we were out of our office for 2 whole months. We weren't allowed in. It was all like quarantined off. They had to like rip a bunch of stuff out, and we forgot about the system in our office. It was by itself. It was growing ground cherries at the time. And when we were finally allowed back in to get like some of our stuff to be able to put it in the moving truck to move to a new location to actually start sending stuff out again, the hydroponic system was perfect. The ground cherries were massive. They were ready to be picked. And it had probably like a couple inches of water at the bottom. So all we needed to do was top it up. And then we were like, okay, perfect. So we just moved the ground cherries to the new office, and they are perfect. So really, you don't need to be worried as much as like soil growing. That you need to be looking at it every day. Hydroponics, I find you have a lot more freedom.
Yeah, I don't think it's an over cumbersome task as such, especially if you're doing in a residential setting where it's fairly controlled, and you have the ability to just leave. If the lights are timed, you have a little fan set up, and there's a pump going to keep the water moving. It's going to grow itself just like it's sitting in the soil, but it's going to grow 40% faster and with 40% less water consumption. So it actually becomes a little bit easier. Now, when you're getting into a commercial setting, you're obviously doubling and tripling the amount of cleaning, harvesting, and checking on the plants. But it's not that you need to be looking at the plants so much sometimes as you are drawn to look at the plants sometimes, because as farmers, we're doing this sometimes because we want to. And as people who would like to try something new, you're going to realize a new symbolic relationship or a holistic relationship you have with your hydroponic system and the plants growing there, and you'll learn to enjoy it, and it may give you some relief and some stress.
Absolutely. Especially like our slide says there, you can grow in any season. The middle of the winter when it's like really bad out and it's just so like sad. I love to just like walk into the greenhouse and just, like it's so green, it's so bright, there's so much alive. It just makes you feel better.
It's fresh.
Makes sense.
What heating or cooling systems are best for hydroponic setups in extreme temperatures? That's a great question. So I can speak to a Jimmy rigged up, and Mackenzie, I'm sure you can speak to the more professional setup. But a lot of people, when they have just like a cold frame or something, if they want to grow in the summer, I always suggest that they put some black buckets filled with water in there. It'll act like a heat sink, and it'll keep your temperature more even throughout the entire growing season. So whether it's a lot warmer in there or a lot cooler, it's going to keep the temperature more even, so it's less of an extreme jump for your plants.
And I'd like to say, depending on the size of your operation, you may need to go into something a little more industrial that's big air exchangers, or you may be looking to spending upwards of $15,000 to $20,000 on good heating and cooling equipment for greenhouses that are up in the 100-foot to 200-foot range in length and 30 or 20 feet wide. You're going to need some pretty big systems, but the traditional technology and stuff that we've seen, if you use a technology that we refer to as like a wallopini, where your greenhouse is more in the ground and utilize the ability of the earth as an insulator, you can reduce the costs of your operation. In places like Newfoundland, where we have heavy access or good access to wood, Newfoundlanders are still burning wood as a source of heat in their homes and their buildings and their workspaces, and that's what we utilize here. I also like to acknowledge the use of geothermal. We use geothermal here at Papa's Farm as well as a custom constructed greenhouse that prevents the heat from escaping the north side during the winter, but allows for the sunlight to still come in during the summer and the south and stuff. So there's a lot of techniques and technology that is out there and available, and you wouldn't believe how much light or heat energy is created from lights sometimes, depending on the amount of lights you have. So, but the biggest thing I find about hydroponics, and the cool thing is, controlling the water temperature actually helps control what the plant does. If you ever hear of a farmer saying their lettuce bolted on them in the middle of the summer because of extreme heat and extreme sunlight, you can actually regulate that by the cooling of the water. So if you can maintain the water temperature, I find it helps maintain the plants above the canopy as well, so that we don't see bolting and deflowering of lettuce when we don't want to. And it's the same with the strawberries if you want to push them into a vegetative stage or a flowering stage.
So we'll quickly view a couple of different types of hydroponic systems and give you guys like just a brief rundown of each one. They're all very different, but they do pretty much the same thing. They all use like a water source, some kind of nutrient in the water, and they need a light, of course, as well. Deep water culture is a great one. That's the one we use here at SucSeed. It you use like a big tank, and you have just the plants floating on top, so they can just drink as they need. You usually also have a bubbler system with this to keep the water moving.
I find that works well with bigger root system plants, tomatoes and cucumbers and stuff.
Yeah, they love the room to be able to spread out and grow. Nutrient film technique, that one's great as well. That one kind of runs on a slight angle. That's what Mackenzie has there. And it's great because you can harvest like full rows at a time. And you're growing like, say, anywhere from 5 to 50 plants in one line at a time, depending on how big your system is. And I find anything can pretty much grow.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I find that's best for the loose leaf varieties. NFT.
Yes, for like the really leafy green ones.
Yeah.
Ebb and flow is another great one. That has kind of like a container. You'll have a pump, which will pump the water up. It's kind of like a tide. So it'll flood it, and then it will go back down to give it a chance to breathe. Flood it again, let the plants have a chance to breathe. Wicking is another great one. This one I find is the most diverse in size. So you can make it really tiny to like the size of a cup, or you can make it giant. So this one I love because you can make it so small. Even if you had like 0 space in your apartment, you could grow this.
Super easy to do at home.
Definitely. Super easy to figure out how to just do it up yourself. Drip systems are awesome as well. Those ones have little drippers that go into each individual plant, and it'll kind of drip at a certain rate. Some plants have a higher drip rate than others just because they need more water. The only downside with dripper systems is I find that unless you're in an area with pristine water, like in the center of Toronto, you're going to have issues with clogging because a lot of places in Newfoundland have harder water that has a lot of mineral buildup. And then you'll find that happening in your tubes as well.
So you don't filter your water. So you're saying they'd have to filter their water in those instances?
Even I find filtering the water in a drip system doesn't fully get rid of all like the salt buildup that you have, or like the nutrient buildup that might happen in the tubes. So I find what people have to do is actually clean out each individual tube as they're cleaning that time. So this one is a bit more labor intensive with the cleaning as such, because there's so many tubes and little pieces that need to be cleaned.
Reverse osmosis is a neat way to filter your water prior to adding your fertilizer, but the only thing I don't like about it is the amount of wastewater that it generates. So we know farmers that, they preach by using RO water, but we also have farmers in Manitoba that are not RO water, and they're starting their grow at 2.4 EC. And by the time the fertilizer's in, it's up to a 4.2. So we recognize that, not all myths are true, and that RO water is good. It definitely helps, but it definitely wastes a lot of water getting there. So, it just comes down to what system is going to work best if you have soft water or hard water. But, you still have to get your water tested and make sure there's nothing in there that could possibly harm the plants.
Definitely. Water tests are key. And do how often would you say, Mackenzie, you do your water tests?
I do a water test at least every 2 months to make sure everything is up to par. But we have artesian well water here, and now we're going to have our own monitoring equipment installed at the farm to make sure that the water is top notch.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Aeroponics is another great one. This one you might have heard as like a tower garden. So these ones are often done vertically. They use misters and nozzles, so they're misting everything instead of the plants being sitting in the water and taking it up that way.
Now these ones are cool. You can actually grow potatoes in aeroponic systems, and that's what my fancy is to get on board of next. But I'm not looking to make money at it. I'm just looking to do it at home in a more casual setting for me and my family. But I have seen potato aeroponic systems, and it's quite interesting to see that we've come that far. But they've been doing hydroponic potatoes in China since the 2000s, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, they're much further ahead than we are, for sure.
Yes. Right.
And I believe
That's
the
our
fogging
problem.
system. Yeah. And I believe the fogging system would be good for that as well. The foggers are a newer system coming out of the Netherlands. But yeah, they've been revamping like old like industrial freezers and things that have like locked doors to be able to like just fog the whole room. And it's really cool, some of the things that they've been coming out with. So Newfoundland has tons of fog, so who knows, maybe we'll be the fogoponics of Canada.
I'm telling you, it's not even a joke. They got the most fog over there where Sydney is, and they put the biggest greenhouse we ever seen in Newfoundland over there. And we were like, what the name of goodness did you do that for? Fog, my son. Let's put an airport over there, too.
Insert Newfie joke, right?
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Awesome. So last couple things we wanted to touch on is just how it'll help Canadians. So a lot of times now farmers are having issues actually finding farm workers. So introducing robots, that is what has been helping us to cut down on labor costs, and also to ensure that we do have the staff to be able to harvest these things. That is one of the biggest challenges of farms nowadays, is finding the labor staff. So robots are really great. They can increase production. In the Netherlands, there's some greenhouses that they don't use any people at all in them. It's all robots. The people stand on the outside and just collect the produce that is coming out of it. There's pros and cons to it. I mean, you don't get to look at your plants. You don't get to see how they're growing. You're just kind of depending on technology. And I find that those need a lot more of kind of like a techie brain rather than a traditional agriculture brain to kind of go this direction.
Yeah, and you still need a farmer. You still do need a farmer to input data and information and keep an eye on things. But I mean, I have an automatic trough washing machine to cut down on the amount of time it takes to wash a trough, because when I can't get help, I need to make help, and unfortunately, that's the lengths we have to go. It's in here in Newfoundland, we're losing our youth and our population. We have an aging demographic, so we recognize the importance to need to get with the times, utilize the technology and the equipment in agriculture like hydroponics. So it makes sense for us, and if we're in such a vulnerable situation, it only makes sense that this technology should be able to help the rest of Canada as well.
Definitely. And actually, over the last 20 years, the amount of farmers under 35 has actually decreased by 3%. So right now, only 8.6%, I believe, of farmers are actually under the age of 35. So we do have quite an aging farming population. So that's another thing that's an issue for farmers for sure. So another thing that we always love to suggest is that there are so many spaces around that are already heated that you could use to grow. So I know right now over in Nova Scotia, they do have a couple of trial hydroponic systems in their grocery stores. So they're actually growing them in the grocery store to put on the shelf in the store, which is amazing because it's going like 20 feet instead of like having to travel 20 days. So that's a great way to add like green to the space, to be able to use unused space. Then they don't have to have like a big stock of like just these, you know, dead plants in the back waiting to go on the shelf. They're having live plants that are actually growing, that are at different stages, so that you can have like 20 this week and then 20 next week and 20 the week after. And it's just kind of preparing you for the future and then having it a lot closer, which is amazing.
Put a Canadian grower in there.
Yes, that's what we need. And of course, the introduction of LED lights has definitely helped, like Aelius's lights. The better the light you have, the better your plants will go. Those old halogen lights that they used to use around here, they weren't only dangerous, but they were ineffective. They were using way too much power. Farmers were getting burned all over the place. LEDs now, they're amazing. They make life so much easier, and you can put them on timers. You can do so much with them.
Yeah, cut down on the utilities is one of the biggest expenses in a farmer's hydroponic experience, aside from, you know, your seed and your fertilizer and medium. Utilities is going to be the big one. We're sending electricity to the pumps, to the fans, to the dehumidifier, but most importantly, we're sending electricity to the lights, and through the use of LED lighting, we're able to get those costs down drastically. Now, programs need to be put together by the government to ensure that farmers in this field of training or this line of work are able to get subsidies to be able to be competitive against global markets and be more competitive, to be able to let people, our friends and our family, buy our products for cheaper. That's the big thing.
And that's a good tie-in, and now we're going to the question and answer. And I've always wondered that, not just with the political uncertainties that are going on here, or the trade wars, but how are governments that you've seen and provincial, the provinces, with these subsidies or loans? I know FCC has been here for a while, but do you see farmers gaining access to more indoor farms as opposed to outdoor farms?
I certainly see other provinces. We had a good meeting with the Premier of Newfoundland, who previously resigned. I believe that was, I don't know if it was a month ago yet, Sydney, or not, but with the Premier and his Agriculture Minister at the time, Elvis Lovelace, we did have a good sit down and conversation with them. And this was prior to the tariffs coming into effect, but they were full support for hydroponics and its ability to stimulate Newfoundland's food security issues. And it was also recognized in British Columbia as being a key player to their agriculture sovereignty as well. I also noticed in, I believe, New Brunswick, and like Sydney said, there's places in Nova Scotia where they're incorporating the hydroponics into the grocery stores, and the produce is being grown. So we do see some positivity finally coming from this situation from the government side. We just need to ensure that there are things put in place that protect the farmer, who is Canadian, and protect the people who are buying the product, which are our family and our friends and our consumers, right? So, you know, safeguards need to be in place, but we also like to say that the government is doing somewhat of a respectable job ensuring that agriculture is increased. But I will say always, I'll play devil's advocate still and play that there needs to be more, and it needs to ensure the longevity of the agricultural industry in Canada for Canadian people, not for exportation purposes, but for Canadians to have access to high quality produce at a low cost, 365 days a year. That needs to be done, and it needs to be done today. Incentives need to be created for those purposes. Sydney?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we definitely need some more support, and having a campaign like Canada First or Local First, that would be amazing if the government could get behind like really pushing and like actually putting like laws in place for like these big box store like Sobeys and Dominion. Like, you have to purchase so much of your produce from this person, from this province, from Canada. I think that would be amazing to be able to put something like that in.
Oh, I almost put quotas on these grocery stores. Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and it's hard to do when we look at the background origin of where the grocery store comes from or where the money is actually going when it goes to the grocery store. If it's not Canadian authentic, it's very hard to manipulate a grocery store that's not really governed the way it should be by Canadians. If this is our watering hole where we go to get water and food, then it should be a place where any Canadian should be able to afford to come and get water and food, not a certain select class of Canadians should be able to afford certain produce. We all should be able to afford it. So it's very important that the rules that are set in place now govern the safe growth of the food, but it also ensures that the food can make it to the market and there's no logistical burden that somebody like a farmer should have to undertake themselves. So coming to the association, the Canadian Hydroponics Association, we hope to provide you with a bigger voice when you do go somewhere and say, we're feeling lack of support. Well, we hope to be there with you and provide you a strong arm for going forward.
Yeah, I think I commend both of you for starting an organization, association up like this. I remember when I first was introduced to you about a year ago, I thought it was a great initiative. We love being part of it, and we love the fact that you're able to come on a show like this, a webinar that can be shared as well too. So even if people missed it, they're still able to interact with this and ask these questions, because organizations like yourself are definitely going to help us here locally in the future sustain, securitize, and stabilize our food production. So I appreciate it very much. I wish we could stay on for 2 hours here, but like I said, we'll definitely have you guys on again just to see where your progress is trending towards. And speaking of progress, how can somebody become part of your association? What do they have to do? Maybe some terms, conditions?
Well, the easiest thing right now, Ryan, I'd like to say thanks to our recently appointed Chief Strategy Officers, Ryan and Tessa Agri from Hope Innovations. They're on the executive. They have revamped the website so that people can easily go online and register to become a member of the Canadian Hydroponics Association and gain access to our exclusive events and discounts like through Gecko Grow on fertilizers and grow mediums, discounts through Waveform Plastics as Dave Hodder with hydroponic systems and towers. And we also have discounts through Harvest Today with Trina Semichuk out of Winnipeg for full turnkey vertical walls and stuff like that. But we also you'll gain access to people like Dr. Vikram Bish out of Manitoba, who is a certified pathologist and helps our members identify plant disease and stuff like that. So all you have to do is visit can-hydro.com, and that'll bring you to our website. We're still doing some upgrades to the website, so if you see things change in the future, that's why. We are still growing, and we're happy to be growing with all of you and all of our new members. We see the membership increase almost daily now, and coming up tomorrow, we're actually having a networking service where some of the new members can come and meet with the old members. Some of the long-standing members like Paul and Clark Smiley, Alejandros, who's over in British Columbia. I mean, we got Becky and Mike from Vertical Roots Canada, and we've even got some new members joining us from Nova Scotia and up in Alberta as well. So we're happy to see everybody and welcome everybody. And, it's exciting time. You can also follow us on Facebook. What do you think? Did I miss anything, Sydney?
No, you wrapped. Yeah, you got everything there. Jeez, I can't. You've grown fast, and don't just because Sprung didn't work out. Don't be afraid to keep pushing with this, because I think it's extremely important, not just for ourselves and our seniors, but also the young people are coming up. They need to know this because they're the ones that are going to be feeding us, right? So
precisely. Absolutely.
Kudos to you for sticking with this and continuing on this good stuff with CHA. That being said, I'll see if there's any questions. Most people ask those questions throughout the presentation, so that worked out really good. I just want to remind everybody that, well, speaking of Mike and Becky, they'll be on here next week. They have 3 or 4 farms over in Alberta right now, and they're doing something similar to what you guys are doing: vertical farming business, indoor hydroponics, local. smaller farms, reaching out to local communities. So that's going to be a great topic. Mike and Becky are awesome on camera, just like you guys were. And then tomorrow, Sylvain Goudreau, he was one of our first clients to actually use our light. It's about 6 years ago. He's going to talk about mastering the light cycle. He's been doing this for quite a while. And I want to remind everybody, once these webinars go live, don't worry if you missed them. They will be available on demand. So there's nothing to lose by just registering. We'll ship it out to everybody. Other than that, guys, thank you very much. This was very informative. I mean it when I say I wish we can do this longer, but you'll definitely be invited back because I think the attendees appreciate it as well.
Excellent.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us today.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a great day.
Cheers.
Cheers.